Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to try to correct an argumentative essay together with you. This comes as a sequel to the video I uploaded earlier onto Moodle. In this video, I tried to explain to you the different characteristics and aspects of an argumentative essay. If you still remember, I explained to you that an argumentative essay needs to include an introduction, a body, that is body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And we zoomed in on these different parts of the argumentative essay, talking, for example, about the introduction. We said that it needs to introduce the topic in 1 or 2 sentences, and then it needs to provide a little bit of background for the reader to come to grips with what you're trying to develop in your essay. And towards the end of the introduction, you need to refer to your thesis statement. The thesis statement, as I said in the last video, needs to be well articulated. It needs to be straightforward, concise, and to the point. The paragraphs that you need to include in the body of your essay should have a particular pattern. They should be patterned along the following lines. They need to start with an introduction, then you need to refer to the opposing view, then you provide your pro-arguments, and then finally, you, having contrasted and compared the opposing view and the pro-arguments that you advance in your essay, you need to come up with a refutation of the opposing view. The conclusion should simply be a summary of your pro-arguments and also your refutations, the refutations that you made of the opposing view. Along with the discussion we had of the argumentative essay, we're going also to examine the essay we have in hand right now based on a rubric of criteria. This is a list of criteria that include global and local aspects. By global aspects, I'm referring here to what is called content, organization, and development. And by local aspects, here I'm talking about grammar, language use or diction or vocabulary, or as you wish to call it. And then finally, we talk about mechanics of writing. By mechanics of writing, we are referring to spelling and punctuation. So the approach I'm going to adopt in examining the essay we have in hand is one that is bottom up. We're going to start from micro level aspects, local level aspects of writing, and then we move up talking about content, organization, and development. So let's start first with the title of the essay. The title reads, "It's not possible to eliminate poverty." On closer examination, we can deduce from the title that the main point that the writer of this essay is trying to develop is that poverty is a phenomenon in society that is impossible to eradicate, that is impossible to get rid of, meaning that everything in the essay, all the ideas, all the paragraphs in the essay should revolve around this basic idea, this essential idea in the essay. Now, let's read the first sentence and try to cast light on some of the issues that we may want to refer to, the problems that this sentence has. It is very difficult, I'm reading the first sentence of the introduction, it is very difficult to deal with poverty in different countries. So at first glance, if you are not wary, if you are not careful, this would appear to you like a good sentence, a grammatically speaking, a good sentence, but in terms of semantics, here you're trying to convey one idea, but in fact, that's not exactly the idea that you have in mind. What this writer wanted to say here maybe is, it is very difficult to deal with poverty in all parts of the world, because by saying in different countries, it's like he's saying that dealing with poverty in countries that are different, it's like he's trying to compare one category of countries with another category of countries, and that is not the idea that it appears that the writer wants to convey from this sentence, and therefore we need to be careful about the words that we are using in our sentences. The second sentence reads, "Poverty," that is here, it's a repetition because you already referred to poverty. No need to repeat the same word over in the second sentence. So you need to use a pronoun, it. And of course, you need to capitalize the first letter of the pronoun. It is one of the biggest social problems that exist. Here there is a spelling issue. That is, we need to remove the S. That exists in all rich and poor countries. Here you're talking about two different types of countries, rich and poor, and therefore instead of saying all, you normally should have said both rich and poor countries. The next sentence, in my way of thinking, I felt felt like, when I read this, I felt like the writer of the essay is like thinking in Moroccan Arabic, thinking in his or her native language, but using English words to cloak that, that is to cover that, to express that, to express that. Instead of saying in my way of thinking, normally the writer should have said to my way of thinking. We cannot, normally that should be attached instead of writing can and not separately. Totally remove poverty, but surely we can control it. Here again, here we have two different issues that have to do with diction, with vocabulary. The first is to remove poverty, and the second is to control poverty. Look, again, this is something I maybe talked about in one of the lectures that we had in class, that is in those face-to-face meetings that we had since the beginning of the semester underway. If you check this out in the dictionary, that is looking for the meaning of, maybe for a synonym for eliminate, maybe you might find the word remove. But finding the word remove as a synonym for eliminate doesn't mean that they are interchangeable in all contexts possible. Sometimes in certain contexts we can use remove, but we cannot use eliminate, and vice versa. There are other contexts where it is possible to use eliminate, but it's not possible to use remove. Therefore, here it's more suitable to say to eliminate poverty and not to remove poverty. This has to do with what is called collocation. Remove poverty, these two words do not collocate. What you normally should have said is eliminate poverty. But surely we can not control poverty, but limit poverty. Again, this is a matter of collocation, because the two words do not collocate, and we need to be careful. I know that this is an advanced level. It comes with much reading. You need to be acquainted with different structures, different idiomatic expressions, different expressions produced by native speakers, so you can get an understanding, get a feel of expressions like these when you meet them as you're reading, I don't know, one of your friends' writings, or as you go about trying to produce your own essay. Now let's move on to the second paragraph. Let's read the first sentence. First of all, some countries try to help poor people by creating different social and financial support through the government. So what is at issue with this sentence is the following. From the introduction, we understand that the position the writer is advocating, that the point the writer is trying to defend in this argumentative essay is that it is impossible to eliminate, it is impossible to limit poverty. But when we read this sentence here, it's like he's giving a suggestion, giving a way in which we can indeed eliminate poverty, which we can indeed limit and eradicate the effects of poverty, which seems to be contradictory. Meaning, if you express a particular thesis in the introduction, you need to stick to that thesis, and you should not, when you come to the following paragraphs, you should not digress away from the point that you are trying to develop in your essay. And that is what is problematic about this sentence. In addition to this, there are a few spelling and let's say vocabulary issues. One is financial. It's already corrected there, talking about this one here. And here there is a wrong use of a preposition instead of through. Normally the student writer should have written from the government, that is singular, not plural. For example, what the student has written is to provide cheaper accommodations or other subsidized living facilities. The problem with this sentence, there are so many different problems here. The first, that is the one that is striking, is that it is a fragment. Meaning, if we check this out, if we try to identify the subject, the verb, and the complementation of the sentence, we're going to find that there is no tensed verb. I mean, we need to have a subject plus a verb in a particular, conjugated in a particular tense, which is not the case with this sentence. So first thing we need to do is to provide the subject, and that is the government might, and then after that we need to provide the verb, which is provide here, and remove the to of the infinitive. Cheaper accommodation, here we have a spelling mistake. Accommodation begins with A and not O. Or other subsidized living facilities it is not the way it should be expressed, but what this student writer wanted to say maybe is or other subsidized housing instead of living facilities. The next sentence reads, thus we need a comma here, This is not what the student wrote. Instead, he wrote, thus this level of societies can be normal, can have normal life. Again, here, this level maybe this is what I deduced from the paragraph. He's talking about a particular segment of people in society. He's talking about the poor people. Poor people living where? Living in society. Instead of saying this level, which makes the idea a little bit complex, a little bit ambiguous and difficult to understand, and therefore we need to make a little bit of change. And instead use poor people living in these societies can have a normal life. Now, let's talk about sentence number 3. More importantly, poor, this is not a beginning of a sentence, and therefore no need for the capital letter. We need to use a lowercase letter. Poor people are usually not very high, again, not very well skilled, not very high skilled, okay? Let me see. Or if you want to use high with skilled, maybe you need to use a hyphen. Okay, but if you want to use them separately, instead of using high, you need to say well skilled. And that makes it very difficult to fit into any work pattern. Maybe what he wanted to say is that makes it very difficult for them to find work instead of to fit into any work pattern, because this is not clear, it's vague, and it doesn't help the reader to understand what is the idea behind what the writer is trying to express. In the next sentence we have some societies hire certain techniques. We don't say hire certain techniques because we don't hire techniques. We hire people. We hire employees. We hire workers, not certain techniques. And therefore, here we have an issue of collocation. Okay, we need to rectify that by saying, no, some societies hire people to train them so they can provide. Instead of that, maybe the student should have said some societies should hire experts to train these people in order to provide better skilled people. Maybe that's the idea but the way it was originally expressed is 100% not easy for us to understand, and therefore we need to cross that out as not good expression of the idea. For instance, there is an S missing here, a question of spelling, and then we have in. Normally we shouldn't have a capital letter, small lowercase letter, I. In Canada, capital because it is the name of a country. There is a program specifically designed, this is passive, so we need to add ed, for low-skilled or low-income people. This program can enhance. The student originally didn't use program. He used this can enhance. That is to make your text cohesive. Sometimes you can repeat certain words, but of course you shouldn't continue to do that each time you want to refer to those words. Maybe a second time you want to refer to a particular word, you can use the expression this program. But the following times, then you should, instead of using the program, maybe you should use something else like a pronoun to refer back to program. By doing this, that is, when you say by doing this, it's not clear. That is, as a reader, I may not be able to understand what you are referring back to, and therefore you need to be explicit about what you are talking about. So instead, you should have said, by offering such programs, because earlier, remember, in the previous sentence and the one before it, you were talking about some kind of program, okay? And therefore, no problem if you can refer back to the program by name again. So by offering such programs, governments, it appears that this student has a serious problem with capitalization. We don't use capital letters in the middle of sentences. We use them at the beginning of sentences, but in case we have a name of, I don't know, a person, a city, a mountain, then it's okay if you can use a capital letter. But in this context, it's wrong to use a capital letter. So governments will ensure to utilize, ensure to, if you check this out in the dictionary, you will find that ensure is a verb that does not admit an infinitive after it. Instead, you should have normally said, will ensure that people utilize all their skills in a productive way. Now, the next paragraph reads, thirdly, uncontrolled poverty can damage the social and economical situations in a country. Here again, we have a few issues that we need to address. The first is uncontrolled poverty flow in a society. This is not clear. To be honest with you, I didn't understand what this student wanted to say in this context, and therefore I just crossed this out. So uncontrolled poverty can damage simply. I mean, you need to be simple, concise, and to the point without using words which you do not know how to use in your writing. So you need to be sure what you're talking about. So uncontrolled poverty can damage the social and economic situations in a country, because economical is a different word. It does exist in English, but it doesn't mean the same as economic. Economical, it is when you want to save money, but economic situation, you're referring to economics. That is the world of economics. So here we have two different meanings, and you need to be careful when you use one of these two words, although they appear to mean the same thing. So if poor people find themselves helpless, that is, if poor people are helpless. No, if a poor people, it's not good to express that in that way. So instead you should have said, if poor people are helpless, they will not feel responsible. When you use adjective responsible, you should normally follow it by preposition for instead of about. Any good, any part of a society, not any good of a society. Thus, there will be an extremely high rates of crime and or other social disorders. So thus there will be an extremely high rate high and extremely. We have this is an indicating singular, but this is connected to rates, and rates here is plural, and therefore you either remove the an or you remove the s. Okay, it's either an extremely high rate of crime or extremely high rates of crime, but not both. And then we have here an S, that should be removed because crime should be taken as uncountable, or and other social disorders. Now let's talk about the conclusion. In conclusion, again, as I said earlier, this student appears to have some real issues with punctuation. You need to be respectful of punctuation. You need to be mindful of how you go about using the different capitalizations and spellings, capitalizations and punctuations necessary to make your ideas clearly stated and articulated, and therefore here this I should be lowercase instead of capitalizing it. So it might not be possible to wipe out, again, same thing here, poverty completely. Now let me just, some of you, as you watch this video, you might say that this is a low level of writing, but be sure under exam conditions, this is the kind of writing. Most of you, a good proportion of students usually turn out writings with problems such as these, and that is why I'm talking about this and asking you to take out of what we are talking about in this essay and try to apply it in your own situation. You try to focus on those areas where you have problems so you can move forward and make progress in your writing. So in conclusion, it might not be possible to wipe out poverty completely, but we need to be aware of how, again here there is of missing, aware how, not aware how, but aware of how to manage it, again, problem of capitalization. Governments should be responsible to subsidize this. Again, this should be crossed out. What we should say, look how many words the student writer is using here. Lots of much wordiness. Instead of using all of these words, you could have said governments should subsidize housing instead of be responsible to subsidize different facilities. It's even not clear what you're talking about there. So you need to be sure about the words that you're using again. Subsidize housing to make it easier for poor people to pay rent. So this is maybe the right way to express that instead of what the way the student expressed it. Moreover, training and education for this level of society can be a good, not solution, it might be acceptable, but a good way to control is better. So can be a good way to control, again, to eliminate, to limit, but to control poverty and other effects, because here we need to refer to the negative effects of poverty. So negative, here we write negative, to limit, to eliminate, to eradicate poverty and other negative effects such as crime. Now, this is as far as those local effects, those local aspects of writing are concerned, meaning grammar, vocabulary, and punctuation and capitalization. Now, let's talk about content, organization, and development. As far as content is concerned, when we talk about content here, we're referring to the quality of the proposition, the quality of the ideas that the student is using in the essay, whether they are quality ideas or not, whether they are quality propositions or not, whether they are relevant to the topic that is being spoken about in the essay. If I were to rate this from 1 to 5, I would give it a rating, that is, I'm talking about here about content, I would give it a rating of 3, because it's there, it's talking about poverty, and it's trying to give us bring us to this idea of, call our attention to this important idea of the difficulty of trying to mitigate the effects of poverty in society. So I would give it something like 3, okay? But talking about organization, again, it's good. Okay, we can clearly see that this student is aware of that is the 4 or 5 paragraph format of an argumentative essay. Here we have an introduction, we have body parts, okay, body paragraphs, and then we have a conclusion, which is good, which is already good. As far as organization is concerned, again, I would give something like, I don't know, 3 to 3.5 for organization. Development is problematic. What do you mean by development? Sometimes a student begins an idea, refers to a particular idea or proposition, but he or she doesn't get through it, meaning he doesn't develop it adequately, satisfactorily, so the reader, when he or she reads that paragraph, would get out of it satisfied, getting a full sense of what the student is trying to talk about in that paragraph. Let's try to map this onto the introduction of the essay we're talking about. It's very difficult to deal with poverty. It is one of the biggest social problems that exist in both rich and poor countries. To my way of thinking, we cannot totally remove poverty, but surely we can limit it. Again, in this context, I would like to refer to the video I made earlier. In this video, when we talked about the introduction for an argumentative essay, I said that we need to introduce the topic with 1 or 2 sentences, and then we need to provide a little bit of background, and then you write your thesis statement. If we apply all of that to this paragraph, we can clearly see that there is not a rich context. That is, the student didn't spend enough time putting the reader in the right context of the essay that is being developed, of the point that is being developed. And therefore, as far as development, with regard to the first paragraph, with regard to the introduction, as far as development is concerned, we feel that it's not adequate. Again, if I were to rate this from 1 to 5, I would give it something like 2, the introduction for this essay. As for the other paragraphs, I think that it's more or less the same situation, especially for paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. That is, it's always the case that this student writer starts something out, but he doesn't develop it in ways that can help satisfy the reader's inquisitiveness, meaning he leaves the reader with so many questions unanswered, and that is a major problem associated with development. Well, that's it as far as this video is concerned. Expect more in the upcoming weeks. Again, if you have any questions, you can write me on Moodle. And bye-bye. See you next time.